You're listening to the Untold American Podcast, hosted by Dean and Jess. It's your go-to show for uncovering the fascinating, bizarre, and untold stories of American history and news. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the stories you won't hear anywhere else.
Welcome back to Untold American, where we dig into the most fascinating and mysterious events in American history. I'm Dean.
And I'm Jess.
Today we're taking you back to 1918 to unpack one of those enduring maritime mysteries of all time, the vanishing of the USS Cyclops. Imagine this. A massive Navy ship, over 500 feet long, vanishes without a trace in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, taking 309 souls with her. It's a story that's both chilling and strangely captivating, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's a mystery that even over a century later still has us asking questions. What happened to the Cyclops? Where did she go? And why has no trace of her ever been found? It's like something out of a ghost story, yet it actually happened.
Exactly. And it's that blend of reality and mystery that makes this case so fascinating. It's a stark reminder that even in our modern world, with all our technology and advancements, there are still things we can't explain, mysteries that defy logic and reason.
And it taps into a deep human need, wouldn't you say? That desire to understand the unknown, to make sense of the things that seem to defy explanation. It's the same impulse that drives our fascination with unsolved crimes, conspiracy theories, and even ancient myths and legends.
You're right. We're naturally drawn to the strange and unexplained. Before we get into the theories, though, let's set the scene. Can you tell us a bit about the Cyclops?
The Cyclops was a Proteus-class collier, which essentially means she was a bulk cargo ship designed to carry coal and other supplies for the Navy. She was over 540 feet long and could haul over 12,000 tons of cargo. A real workhorse of the fleet, especially during World War I.
Right, and this was the heart of World War I, a time of incredible global tension and uncertainty. Kind of feels relevant today, doesn't it? A world on edge, a lot of unknowns.
It does feel eerily similar in some ways, doesn't it? That sense of a world in flux, the threat of unseen dangers lurking just beneath the surface. And just like today, information was key. The Cyclops played a crucial role in transporting vital war materials, things like manganese ore, which was essential for steel production.
So this wasn't just any ship. She was crucial to the war effort, moving between continents.
Yeah.
A lifeline in a chaotic world. Now, from what I've read, the Cyclops wasn't exactly in top condition for this last voyage.
Right.
That's right.
She had a cracked cylinder in her starboard engine, which meant she was essentially running on half power. This would have limited her speed and maneuverability, making her more vulnerable to rough seas or, well, anything unexpected.
Okay, so we've got a ship that's vital to the war effort, but maybe not in the best shape. And she's sailing through the Atlantic Ocean in 1918, a time when German U-boats were a very real threat.
It's already setting up to be a tense situation. Definitely. And to add to the intrigue, the Cyclops' last voyage was also shrouded in some peculiar circumstances. She left Rio de Janeiro in February of 1918, loaded down with manganese ore, which, as we mentioned, was crucial for the war effort.
But it wasn't her usual cargo, right?
Yeah.
Coal was more typical for a collier like the Cyclops.
Exactly. And this is where things start to get interesting. Manganese ore is much denser than coal. Think about it. You can fit a lot more coal in a given space than you can manganese ore. So even though the Cyclops might not have exceeded her weight limit, the density of the ore could have changed her center of gravity and how she handled in the water.
So potentially, even if she wasn't officially overloaded, she might have been carrying a cargo that wasn't ideal for her design, especially given her engine issues.
It's a possibility that some experts believe could have made her more susceptible to capsizing, especially in rough seas. And remember, this was the Atlantic in winter, not exactly known for its calm waters.
Right, and then there's that whole thing with the unscheduled stop in Barbados, adding another layer of mystery.
Yes, this is where it gets really strange. She stops in Barbados on March 3rd, taking on more food and coal, even though records indicate she already had plenty of both to make it to her destination in Baltimore.
It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Why stop for supplies if you don't need them, especially when you're on a vital wartime mission?
Exactly. And the next day, March 4th, the Cyclops sends her final message. Weather fair, all well.
And then nothing.
Yeah.
Silence. A ship over 500 feet long, packed with hundreds of people and tons of vital cargo, just vanishes.
And not just vanishes, but vanishes without a trace. No distress signals, no debris, no wreckage ever found. It's like she simply ceased to exist.
Okay, so we've got a ship with engine trouble, potentially unstable cargo load, a strange and unexplained stop, and then poof, gone. It almost sounds like a setup for a conspiracy theory, doesn't it? It makes you wonder what people back then must have thought. It's 1918, there's a war going on, you've got this massive ship just disappearing into thin air. Must have been terrifying.
It's easy to imagine the fear and speculation that must have gripped people's minds back then. And in a way, it's not so different from the anxieties we face today. The feeling that things are beyond our control, that unseen forces might be at play. It's a timeless human experience, isn't it?
You're right about that. So what are some of the theories that have been proposed over the years? What could have possibly happened to the Cyclops?
Well, there are a few main theories, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Some are more plausible than others, and some, well, let's just say they lean into the more mysterious side of things.
Okay, let's start with the more conventional explanations.
One of the initial theories, and perhaps the most straightforward, is that the Cyclops simply encountered a catastrophic storm. The Atlantic, especially in the early months of the year, can be notoriously unpredictable and unforgiving.
Right, and there were reports of some pretty severe storms in the area around the time she vanished. Do you think a storm alone could explain such a complete and utter disappearance, though? I mean, wouldn't there be some kind of trace, some debris, something?
That's a good question, and it's one of the main reasons this theory has been met with skepticism. The Cyclops, even with engine trouble, was a massive vessel. To simply be swallowed up by a storm without leaving any trace seems, well, unlikely, to say the least.
That's like those stories you hear about planes vanishing mid-flight. It just seems impossible in this day and age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yet here we are, over a century later, and these kinds of mysteries still happen.
Exactly. It's a reminder that for all our technological advances, there are still forces in this world that can baffle and confound us. The ocean, in particular, holds a certain power, a vastness that can both awe and terrify.
And that ties into another theory that's been floated in enemy action. We were in the middle of World War I, and the German U-boats were a constant threat in the Atlantic. Could the Cyclops have been torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine?
It's certainly a possibility, and one that was seriously considered at the time. The Cyclops, carrying vital war materials, would have been a prime target. However, there are a couple things that make this theory less likely.
Like what?
Well, first, no German records have ever been found claiming responsibility for sinking the Cyclops. And during wartime, you'd expect there to be some kind of record, some boast, something.
Right. It would be a propaganda victory for them.
Exactly. And second, no wreckage has ever been found that would definitively point to a U-boat attack. No torpedo fragments, no signs of an explosion, nothing.
So if it wasn't a storm or a U-boat, what else could it have been?
This is where things get really interesting and where we start to delve into the realm of possibilities that are both intriguing and, well, a bit unsettling. Remember how we talked about the Cyclops carrying manganese ore instead of her usual cargo of coal?
Right, and how the ore was much denser and could have affected her stability.
Exactly. Well, one of the leading theories is that the Cyclops might have suffered a catastrophic structural failure due to the weight and density of the manganese ore.
So she essentially broke apart at sea.
That's the idea. Think about it. A ship already weakened by engine problems, carrying a cargo that's putting immense stress on her hull, sailing through potentially rough seas. It wouldn't take much for things to go wrong very quickly.
And if the ore shifted during a storm, causing a sudden imbalance, it could explain why there was no time for distress call. She could have just capsized and sunk in a matter of minutes.
Precisely. And this theory gains even more traction when you consider the fate of the Cyclops' two sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus.
Right, I remember reading about those. They
Which-
disappeared too, didn't they?
They did. And under eerily similar circumstances, both ships were sold to civilian operators in 1941 and were lost while carrying heavy loads of bauxite ore, which is similar in density to manganese ore.
So 3 nearly identical ships, all carrying dense ore, all vanishing without a trace. That's a pretty compelling pattern, wouldn't you say?
It is, and it makes the structural failure theory one of the most plausible explanations. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That a ship, seemingly so strong and powerful, could be brought down by something as seemingly simple as the weight of her cargo.
It is, and it kind of makes you think about the fragility of even the most robust human creations, doesn't it? We might think we have mastery over nature, but sometimes nature reminds us who's really in control.
It's a humbling thought, for sure.
Now, before we get too deep into those existential waters, we have to talk about another element of this story that adds a whole other layer of intrigue. The captain of the Cyclops. George W. Worley.
Ah, yes, Captain Worley. A fascinating and controversial figure, to say the least.
And a figure who's been at the center of a lot of speculation surrounding the Cyclops' disappearance.
Absolutely. Accounts from former crew members paint a rather unflattering picture of Worley. He's been described as gruff, eccentric, even a poor seaman. Some even alleged he was prone to fits of rage and erratic behavior.
Wow, that's not exactly the kind of guy you want at the helm of a ship, especially during wartime. Did any of these accounts offer specific examples of his behavior?
Oh, yes. There are stories of him chasing a crew member around the deck with a pistol, making erratic and illogical decisions, and generally creating a chaotic and stressful environment on board.
It sounds like something out of a pirate movie.
Mm.
Did any of these actions directly relate to the ship's disappearance, though? Or is it more of a general sense that he wasn't a competent captain?
There's no direct evidence linking his behavior to the ship's sinking, but it's hard to ignore the possibility that his command style, his decision-making, might have contributed to the tragedy.
For example?
Well, there's a matter of the unscheduled stop in Barbados. Worley's decision to take on additional supplies, even though the ship seemingly had enough, has always been a source of speculation.
Right, and it makes you wonder what was going through his mind. Was it a genuine miscalculation? A sign of incompetence? Or was there something more to it, something deliberate?
Some have theorized that Worley, who was of German descent, might have had sympathies for the enemy. Perhaps he deliberately sabotaged the ship or steered her into a dangerous situation.
That's getting into some pretty serious conspiracy theory territory.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence to support those claims?
There's been no concrete proof found to suggest Worley was a saboteur or had any malicious intent. However, there's one piece of evidence that adds to the intrigue surrounding him. A telegram from the U.S. consul in Barbados.
Oh, what did it say?
The consul expressed serious distrust of Worley, referring to him as a damned Dutchman, and hinting that there might have been trouble brewing on board the Cyclops before she left Barbados.
Wow, okay. So we've got a captain with a questionable reputation, a mysterious, unscheduled stop, and a telegram that raises serious concerns about the captain's character and intentions. It's enough to make anyone wonder if there's more to this story than meets the eye.
It certainly is, and it highlights another aspect of mysteries that we find so captivating. The human element, the personalities involved, the motivations, the potential for both heroism and treachery. These things add a layer of complexity and depth that keeps us guessing, keeps us wanting to know more.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but the pieces keep changing shape and you're never quite sure if you have all of them.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the added element of the location where the Cyclops disappeared, an area that's become synonymous with mystery and unexplained phenomena. The Bermuda Triangle.
Ah, yes, the Bermuda Triangle, the legendary region where ships and planes vanish without a trace. It's almost too perfect, isn't it? A ship with a mysterious past, a potentially unstable captain, and then she disappears in the most notorious maritime mystery zone in the world.
It does add a certain level of intrigue, doesn't it? Although it's important to remember that the Bermuda Triangle is often associated with more speculative theories that haven't been scientifically proven.
Right. But even if you're not a believer in the paranormal or the supernatural, there's still something undeniably captivating about the Bermuda Triangle. It's like a blank canvas onto which we project our fears and fascinations about the unknown.
I think you're right. It represents that part of us that craves answers, that seeks to understand the things that seem to defy logic and reason. And even though we might never know for certain what happened to the Cyclops, the search for those answers, the exploration of the possibilities, is part of what makes this story so enduring.
You know, as we've been talking about this, I've been thinking about how the story of the Cyclops in some ways reflects the kind of world we live in today.
How so?
Well, think about it. We're bombarded with information, with news of conflicts and disasters happening all over the globe. There's a sense of uncertainty, of things happening that we can't control or fully understand. It feels like we're constantly searching for answers, for explanations, in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
That's a really interesting parallel. And just like with the Cyclops, sometimes those answers elude us. We're left with questions, with theories, with a sense of mystery that lingers long after the event itself.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe the search for those answers, the willingness to embrace the unknown, is just as important as finding a definitive solution.
Perhaps it even helps us to connect with something bigger than ourselves, with the vastness and mystery of the universe.
I like that. It's a reminder that we don't always have to have all the answers. Sometimes it's enough to just acknowledge the mystery, to appreciate the wonder and the awe that comes with encountering something we can't fully explain.
And to remember the human stories at the heart of these mysteries. The 309 souls lost with the Cyclops, their lives, their hopes, their dreams are part of this enigma too. We can't forget that.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the theories and the speculation, but ultimately, this is a story about people, about loss, about the fragility of life. And those are themes that resonate just as strongly today as they did over a century ago.
It's interesting, isn't it, how back in people were so quick to blame sabotage or enemy action.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a different world back then.
Yeah.
In the middle of a war, limited communication technology.
Right. Makes sense that their anxieties would be focused in that direction. The fear of the unknown, the enemy lurking in the shadows.
For sure. But these days, we have so much more information at our disposal. We can look at the weather patterns, study the ocean currents. We have sonar and satellite imagery.
Yeah. We can examine the ship for structural flaws in a way that would have just blown their minds back then.
So our approach to these mysteries has gotten a lot more scientific, more data-driven.
True, but we're also, I think, a lot more open to the possibility that some things just can't be explained.
Like, you think back in 1918, people were even talking about the Bermuda Triangle. That wasn't even on the radar.
No, not at all. But today it's like this global phenomenon that really speaks to our enduring fascination with the unexplained.
It's funny, isn't it? We have so much more technology and information than ever before, but we're still drawn to the mysteries, to those things we just can't explain. It's almost like some primal instinct, that need to grapple with the unknown.
It's true. I think it speaks to a basic desire we all have, that need to make sense of the world around us, to find patterns and explanations, even for things that seem inexplicable. And it's what pushes us to explore, to ask questions, to challenge the boundaries of what we know.
And sometimes those boundaries lead us right back to the mysteries, to all the stuff we still don't understand.
You got it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Keeps us humble, keeps us curious. And it forces us to stay engaged with the world in a way that we wouldn't if we thought we already had all the answers.
I love that. So we may never know for sure what happened to the USS Cyclops, but I think we can all agree that it's a pretty powerful story. And it reminds us, I think, that there are still mysteries out there. The unknown is still a powerful force, and our fascination with those strange, unexplained things, well, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. It reminds us that the ocean, even with all its beauty and wonder, is still a force to be reckoned with. It's this massive, unforgiving world with secrets we may never discover.
And maybe that's all right. Maybe that's part of what keeps the story alive, all the unanswered questions. Every generation, they keep coming back to it, searching for those answers, hoping for some understanding, trying to peek into the heart of the unknown.
Well said. And maybe, just maybe, in that search, we discover something even more profound. Maybe we learn a little bit more about ourselves and our place in this vast and mysterious world.
Jess, thanks for joining us today. I feel like we really dug deep into the mystery of the USS Cyclops, though if I'm being honest, I have a feeling this is one of those stories that's going to stick with me. I'm going to keep thinking about it, wondering what really happened.
Me too. It's one of those stories that really captures your imagination, gets those wheels turning. It makes you wonder, what if? Could it be? And those questions, I think, will stay with us long after we're done talking about it. Who knows? Maybe someday new technology will emerge, or we'll stumble across some incredible discovery and the Cyclops will finally give up her secrets.
Until then, the mystery lives on. As always, I'm Dean.
And I'm Jess. Join us next time for more Untold American, where we'll uncover more stories that fascinate and intrigue, and maybe even challenge what you thought you knew about American history.
This has been the Untold American podcast with Dean and Jess. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed exploring these untold stories with us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with fellow history buffs and curious Mayas. Don't forget to leave a review. Your support helps us uncover even more fascinating stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep discovering America's untold tales.